everybody that we are recording. So if just wanted to point that out as a reminder to everybody. Okay, well, first I'd like to thank everybody for signing up and joining in this pandemic. This is definitely a challenge for all of us, and that's why we're having this, to open it up, to get more ideas, to really kind of make sure we haven't missed anything. Okay, so if you have any questions, at the bottom of your screen you'll see chat. You can definitely go ahead and put a question in there if you like, if you don't want to speak, and again we can go from there. Today's discussion is mainly going to be about health and safety. That's what we're going to be talking about in this room. Okay, so we're health and safety. We're not about the education part. That's another room. That's another problem. So we have many problems. So we're going to try to deal with them all.
Tell people to turn their computer volume down, Jim, because they're stating they have a lot of wicked feedback.
Okay. So turn your volume down if you have a lot of wicked feedback, or mute yourself. You could do both. And hopefully that will resolve the issue. Okay, so anyway, my role as facilitator today, who is also assisting with that, by the way, is Paul Swighton. He is with Questar. He is a health and safety director. My role and Paul's role as facilitator is to support the discussion. Okay, so mainly what we're going to do is I'm going to give you guys the questions, and you folks are going to have a discussion about this, and we're going to try to answer the questions. Keep in mind, there's no right or wrong. Okay, this is just, we're all new at this. This is something that we're all learning as we go. But anyway, I'll be taking notes of your key points, and then we're going to contribute some of these key notes back in the session at the end of the meeting. Okay, so, and again, it is being recorded also. So anything you say is going to be recorded, and these recordings will be listened to for more information. So mainly what we have here is we have three categories. We have in-person instruction. So we all know what that means. That means everybody returns to school, teachers, students, just like we did before. That's option one. Option two is remote instruction. So option two is everybody stays home, nobody comes to the building, and children will basically learn off of their computer. And option three is a combination of options 1 and 2. I'm going to read all three questions, okay, just so you could hear them, and then we're going to go back to question 1, and then we're going to start our discussion. And again, I ask, I don't know how we're going to do this yet, but one person at a time. Everybody will have a chance to speak. We have an hour, so just under an hour. So, so the three questions are, and the first one is, what do you think are the greatest challenges that GCS will face under each of the three instructional models? So those three models are the three options I just read to you. Question 2 is, can you provide concrete examples of creative solutions to challenging problems that could work in our school under each of the three instructional models? And the third question is, what instructional, budgetary, and regulatory obstacles, including policies, stand in the way of our success in each of these three instructional models? So, question 1, again, we'll go back. What do you think are the greatest challenges that GCS will face under each of the three instructional models? So now I'm going to open up the floor. Don't forget you are muted. If you wish to speak, that's fine. Unmute yourself. When you're done speaking, just mute yourself back, and we will start the discussion with whoever would like to step up to the plate first.
All right, if nobody else will, I think I'll go for it.
That's fine, Dan. Thank you.
Okay, so if we're looking strictly from the health and safety standpoint, one of my biggest ones is like none of us necessarily know what everyone's doing. So I've been watching, case numbers are climbing in states other than New York.
Correct.
So one concern I have would be like, assuming we all return under Model 1, fully in person, how do we know that if people are traveling out of state, like fairly close to when we do return, how do we know that they're safe? And how do we ensure that everybody involved stays safe? So that's one of my biggest challenges that I see.
I'll go next to kind of piggyback on that if you're finished. Am I good to speak?
Yes, you are.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
You're good.
So yeah, I think the blanket statement would be, to piggyback on you, Dan, is the spread. But the spread, it's out of house, the house being the school. So are people traveling? Are they remaining cognizant of guidelines in their personal lives? Who are working parents coming in contact with? How are they acting socially, traveling to other states? And then the spread would also directly affect in-house. So if you've got people potentially being exposed in extracurricular activities, vacation, travel, that would ultimately bring it inside the building. And then the second challenge would be, which I just want to say thank you for taking this responsibility on, because your job, I'm optimistic that we can come up with a great plan, but it's pretty impossible. How would you curb the spread, or not even curb, if there was a case located in the building, what types of resources would you have? Is it even in the budget to increase like sanitation staff? And with incubation periods, that's really the unknown, is if someone traveling to another state or someone exposed brings it into the building, up to 2 weeks could pass before things exponentially multiply. So yeah, Dan is right. The unknown of outside brings the unknown of inside. The spread is ultimately what we have to try to contain. So that's going to be the biggest challenge. Erasing an invisible virus with staff, with, I'm going to call them cleaning supplies, masks. I've surveyed friends of mine, family members who are nurses, who are full-time working parents, who are stay-at-home parents, to see what their concerns were in anticipation of this meeting. And the big thing was, even if there is a policy in place and it seems fairly bulletproof, how do we have our youngest students successfully implementing that? So I think this initial chat is probably going to be all over the place till we can hone in on certain sections to really kind of iron out. But how in the building would you protect our students and our staff from, like what Dan is saying, the unknown? Because you cannot possibly hold every single person coming in contact with a student or a staff member accountable for their actions outside of the building.
Well, duly noted. I mean, that's an excellent comeback, and you're right. I mean, there's no way to protect everybody at any given time if everybody was to come back into the school. But that's what we don't forget. We also have two other options here. So we have remote, and then we also have part, okay, which would be a combination of A and B. But yes, what you said is I mean, it's a great point. I mean, how do you come back, and put everybody back into this building? And I mean, this could be the cleanest place in the United States, and as soon as you fill this house up with people, it gets contaminated. So hey, Paul, I'm gonna have you touch base a little bit on that. Again, this is Paul Swaden with Questar Health and Safety. So, if you have any comments you'd like to add to that? Okay.
Okay, now that Jim's muted himself so we don't have feedback. Well, uh, it's a serious issue. It's a serious problem, and I'm not discounting it, but I'm going to add a little perspective here. COVID isn't our first virus that we've ever handled. We always deal with this every flu season. So we always have the problem of transmission, whether it's COVID, influenza, H1N1. These are things that happen yearly, especially during flu season for us. So we always have the problem. Every time kids come back from Thanksgiving or Christmas, where did you go? Who did you meet? What did you bring back into the building? In regards to transmission, symptoms usually appear within 48 hours. So if somebody starts showing symptoms, we can figure it out pretty quickly that they're symptomatic. We get Department of Health involved, and then we start isolating people, and the Department of Health does tracing. So if an outbreak starts to happen in the community, we can pretty quickly, with the county's help, get a handle on what's going on and who we need to isolate and where do we need to go from there. As it goes to cleaning, we have very good cleaning policies in place that existed prior to COVID. Because
we're getting that feedback again.
Yeah, it is all the way down.
Yeah.
Can't hear very well.
Let me up mine. Can you hear me better now? Okay, so we already had pandemic cleaning procedures in place long before COVID. We created them many cycles ago, going all the way back to swine flu. Under the state's regulations, we created plans. So we had plans in place to jump onto prior to COVID that were perfectly designed for it. It comes down to intense cleaning and sanitation. Everybody likes to throw the word disinfection around. Disinfection is the wrong word. That's more of a hospital grade level cleaning, which we could never achieve in any place other than a hospital or a specialized lab. So for us, it's cleaning and sanitation. CDC guidance says that you're most likely to catch it person to person respiratory. So even though you're not very likely to catch it from a touched surface, we still are doing a significant increase in disinfection of touched surfaces, especially frequently touched surfaces, doorknobs, handles, desks, things like that. Though CDC's concern really is respiratory. We have no real guidance yet from the state. They're working on that. But what we've seen coming out of other states that are developing their guidances right now, more than likely the state's going to require all staff to wear masks. If you cover your face, that's the best way we can reduce transmission from asymptomatic people. Whether students cover their faces or not will be a state decision. Some states are saying we can't make the students do it. Some states are saying they will make the students do it. That'll come up down to what the governor says. The only thing I'll say there, and this is me stepping out of my role in health and safety for a minute and just talking about schools and students in general, if we do have students wear masks, we just need to be gentle with them. And when a kid forgets his mask or it breaks or whatever reason, because we're going to have issues with children who just don't want to wear the masks, let's just keep it as a teaching moment instead of worrying about yelling at them. Because I know all of us have gone out into the community and there's always that grumpy person yelling at you because you don't have your mask on right or whatever. So we're going to have to be patient with our kids. But we can't increase staff because all of us know the governor is probably going to cut our budgets. So we're going to have less money to do what we can with. We are increasing our regular cleaning routines. And I guarantee you one of the policies that the state is going to implement, because we already implemented it before at the beginning of the COVID crisis, is that if there is a symptomatic student, let's say a kid goes on vacation for the weekend and comes back and their parents tested positive for COVID. As soon as we find out, which will more than likely be from the Department of Health, we will probably shut the school district down under Department of Health's guidance for 24 to 48 hours and do a deep cleaning disinfection of the building. That was policy when the COVID crisis first started. I have a feeling that Department of Health and the state will continue with that policy. So instead of having a big outbreak, if we start to see any increase, we'll probably do a short-term closure and disinfection, and the Department of Health will make the determination beyond that of what goes on. At the end of the day, as much as we control the buildings, we are still being overseen by SCD and Department of Health, and Department of Health will guide us as best they can. And they have eyes on every case in the county, so they'll know stuff before we know stuff. Now, when it comes to staff and employees, if a staff member is exposed, that staff member is instructed not to come back until they've had a COVID test that is negative under direction of their doctor or under direction of Department of Health. And we social trace immediately, and anybody in direct contact, Department of Health will take over from there. So we are trying through social tracing and the guidance of the county and ultimately SCD and the governor to minimize exposure. When exposure happens, we isolate that down. We are increasing disinfection and cleaning wherever possible, especially high touch surfaces. We are using only products that are recommended by the state and CDC as being the most effective products. And we can't be perfect, but we can try to do the best we can with the resources we have. And personally, the best hope we can have is that our budgets don't get cut too badly so that we still have additional resources to work with. But at the end of the day, no matter what plans we come up with, we are still going to follow whatever the governor, state ed, and Department of Health tell us. They're the ones in charge of the crisis. We will always defer their guidance. I'm going to shut up now and let other people talk. Sorry.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Paul. Does anybody like to
I think Jen has a
follow and
question.
answer question? Answer to that question there. Jen, you want to speak?
Yeah, thanks. I'll go. I'll kind of piggyback off of the first questions related to the spread, maybe more specifically related to what I work in is the field of HVAC. And so along those lines, my thoughts are, how are we going to minimize the bioload or just keep it down? I kind of go into this assuming there will be some of the virus in any public space in the school. How do we keep the bioload down? And so my perspective will be related to the area of ventilation and HVAC and what are things that we could do to improve that. But overall, I think that an overarching challenge for all of us is how are we going to evolve as the world learns more about this virus? So for example, there is emerging evidence right now that it could be airborne. I don't know that that's necessarily definitive yet, but we could learn after we finalize the plan more than we do now. And so I think there also needs to be a process to adapt as we learn more.
Yeah, and we definitely have some definitely big challenges ahead of us, and let's not forget that that's the reason why we're here. It's because we don't have all the answers. This is new to everybody here. So that's obviously, I think, one of the biggest problems is trying to get people back into this school and how do we clean. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer. Let's go to option 2, which is remote clean. Does anybody have anything else for option 1?
No, I had something for completely homeschool.
Yep.
Okay.
I think Andrea has her hand up.
Go ahead, Andrea. Go ahead.
Hi. Why isn't anybody talking about face shields?
Can I actually piggyback on that a little bit? So I'm thinking also on that topic, some classes, such as band, for example, the one I teach, you can't play a wind instrument and wear a mask. So there has to be some type of system in place for that to be done safely. And I know there's a big study going on right now in Colorado, specific to music, basically, and the whole aerosol issue and how much that actually is an issue as it pertains to wind and brass. So they should have some findings, hopefully in a few weeks on that. But I think that's something we need to also keep in mind is for situations where masks physically cannot be worn. Like, how do we ensure safety there and how much safety can be ensured?
For instance, when you eat,
Yep, that too.
kids have to eat.
You
can't wear a mask.
face shield on. You can eat with the face shield on. And the face shield also allows people to see your face, which I think students would, especially the little students, would be much more tolerant of.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with everybody on the face shields, and especially when it comes to the emotional face recognition. But the problem with the face shields right now is the federal government, CDC, considers the face shields not to be effective. They're studying the issue, but federal guidance right now says the face shields do not prevent the spread at all, and it should only be used in extreme cases where a mask can't be worn. So right now, the highest level of guidance doesn't support the face shields. I agree with everybody's views on the face shields, and I think we may have to move to that in some cases. But right now, the guidance from on high is not supporting it. So
Yeah. Well, let's not
So then-
forget, there's no right or wrong. Again, we're all learning. This is all new. All the ideas that everybody's coming up with are great because, this is what we need to do. You brainstorm. That's fine. Does anybody else have anything for option one with returning? Again, we're going to have more meetings. There's going to be more stuff to talk about. We're not going to fix them overnight. With the face shields, I think, Tina, I think you're here. Obviously, how should children wear face shields in gym class, correct? All right, maybe Tina's not here.
I'm
But-
here. I'm
Oh,
here.
okay, there you are. Thank you. So, again, I don't know.
Yeah, right now there's a lot of things coming down through athletics that I'm kind of focusing on, and that kind of piggybacks with, PE. At this point, I have no idea. I can space them out and we can go outside and things like that, but ultimately really don't want a face mask on a kid who's going to be running around because it's not good for their respiratory anyway.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys. I know just walking around stores for a while with a mask on, you gotta take it off and breathe for a second or two. It's like, wow, you don't realize how much it really restricts the flow and stuff. So, but that's fine. That's again why we're here. We're here to discuss everything and just kind of see the pros and the cons. Anybody else have anything? I want to move this along because we still have 2 more questions, and I want to jump to the remote instruction for question 1.
Jim? Jim?
Yeah.
Could I just add, just hallways and passing from class to class is another thing, like a concern that we'd have to think about, directing or keeping a flow of traffic in the hallways, perhaps staggered dismissals so that kids can get from one place to the other without being all in the hall at once.
Yeah, again, we've talked about instead of the students changing classes, have the teachers change, but then that presents a problem with the students that are in the classrooms because not, the students change. When kids change for the classes, you have some going to math, some going to history and so forth. If a teacher was to change classes, that would, I don't know how they would build a schedule, but they would, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. Maybe the answer is, let kids change, but, do it one class at a time. The problem there is now we're going to lose a lot of time as the day goes by. If we start doing, 1 or 2 classes at a time, you start losing 5, 6, whatever the time frame is, So again, a lot of challenges. I'm just pointing this stuff out, as a facilitator because, we have met already and we've discussed a lot of these issues and problems and they're not easily resolved, so again, that's why we're reaching out and to get input. Okay. Any other questions on question 1, in-person instruction?
I just have one more thought. As we're talking about the logistics of athletics and band and hallways, they're all very pertinent exchanges and activities. I just want to point out that at the end of the day, too, especially mask wearing is a highly contested topic. So even if as a team we come up with something that, seems to keep people's students and teachers spread and safe, we need to also consider that there will be parents who feel like it would be exercising their children's rights to not wear a mask. So it may not be widely accepted, just as like Common Core, we had parents opting out. So I think whatever whatever plan is constructed, there may also be, it may be contested. So you may not have every student coming to school willing to comply. So that's just something maybe we need to at least, consider.
Be similar to their clothing. It would be part of that. You violate the school policy on clothing, you follow the punishments that go associated with their dress code.
Yeah.
If it becomes part of the
That makes
dress
perfect
code,
sense.
to me, that would be my theory on how to maintain the health and safety of that. It becomes part of your dress code.
Yeah.
You don't wear it, you're sent home. I don't know. That's just my thinking as a parent.
No, this is great.
Yeah.
Again, that's why we're here to discuss it like this, there's other issues, you could be, listen, all the kids can come in wearing their mask and then all of a sudden the mask breaks or the kid takes it off because he's sweating, or how about a student that gets sick, after he's here or she's here after like 3 hours, break out with a fever. I mean, it's not like it's never happened before, and then, what happens at that point? And then what if they be tested and they come back positive? Now, this student was in the school, there's a whole bunch of problems that, can come from this. But again, great discussion here.
I do have something on the complete homeschooling. The
Okay,
remote
good. Well,
schooling.
I'm going to go there next, actually. So are we good with question 1, option 1? I want to get to the remote instructional, which...
One more thing I wanted to add for in-person and hybrid, they may want to start with some kind of daily screening. I know in the hospital, I'm screened daily with temperatures and questionnaires every time I come to work.
Oh, we would. No, we've already talked about that. And that's
Yeah.
something that there would be temperature checking and there would be
Yeah.
a form you have to fill out.
Is that for the students?
I'm sorry?
Is that for the students or is that for everyone coming into the building?
It's supposed to be for everybody. They're going to be temperature checked and they're going to have to fill out a quick form.
Right.
Paul, you could answer that. Has the form been created or is that still in the process?
The form is created, it's out there. As of last week, it's out there for the school district. We're just getting it implemented right now because staff aren't fully coming into the building. Within BOCES, we've already implemented it. I have to do a form every single morning before I leave the house. I take my temperature, I do the form. Some school districts for summer school are testing students as they come in the building.
Yep.
There is an in-school district out there in our 3 counties that is actually testing students at the bus stops. They are having an aide travel on every bus and test. We have to remember that for summer school, we are limited in amount of students, so it's more practical when the school year starts. How do you test 450 kids coming in the building at the same time?
Yeah.
So there's logistical issues, but everybody will be tested at some level.
Well, there's different time issues there. I mean, trying to test all these people. And again, like I said earlier, let's not forget that you can come into the school feeling fine and be sick 3 hours later. You can come into the building with this COVID and not have any symptoms at all. Okay, so, there's a whole bunch of variations that follow suit here. But again, thank you for your input on that.
I had one more question about that. I'm sorry. I know you want to move on.
It's okay.
I was reading somewhere, I was doing some research, and some districts were talking about, I don't know if it was in New York State, but kind of amending the single point of entry thing for the situation where there might be several entrances that are open and then of course locked after people are in the building. But in terms of sort of having smaller groups of kids coming in and having temperature checks, if we could have more entrances open.
Right. Well, right now, again, that's still in the discussion. It's a great question. I think right now we're definitely looking at least 2. So there would be one on Main Street and one on the 9G side. Now, one thing that hasn't been brought up here, I don't really know if it's part of our discussion, but, how do we get the kids here if we did? I mean, can you put 40 kids on a bus? Is that okay?
Right.
No, I doubt very much if that's okay. So So again, we have a lot of, that might be, I believe that's in a different category. I think that's under
It should be under transportation.
transportation.
Yeah.
Which is under,
But that would be definitely difficult too, because they're talking,
and that's under the business manager, but yeah, yeah,
and spaced out when we have K through 12 on the same bus.
right,
It
right,
would be it's a great challenge of transportation.
yeah.
Right.
A huge challenge, because it's not like we can keep sending buses out, because that would increase the cost of transportation to a point where we wouldn't be able to function. So, you know, so again, great questions, big problems, you know. All right, anybody else have any questions for this option before we move on? All right, so remote instructional. So that would be obviously everybody stays home. Now, again, this is from a health and safety portion of it, okay? This is not about the educating part. Who would like to start?
I came up with a really good one that actually my job has been focusing on, is the safety of kids in abusive homes. We're not really, you know, teachers are the #1 mandated reporter in New York State, and you don't have that day-to-day in-person contact to know the signs and signals of abuse in home. Our families leaving their 5-year-old kid alone because they don't have anybody else to watch them while they have to go to the grocery store, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the biggest concern that I've had this whole time. I work in the mental health field, and that's been a huge problem where I work. So that is one of the biggest issues. And I see a lot of people saying yes and agreeing, because it's a huge concern.
Again, these are things that we have discussed. It's not just kids being left alone. It's kids that are being abused, kids that don't have food. I mean, the list goes on, and you know, and again, that's why we're here to discuss all these things, you know. Okay, anybody else have anything for remote learning from a health and safety point of view? Okay, good, because we're running out of time. So now we can get to option 3, combination of 1 and 2. So where they come to school part-time. Does anybody have any opinions on that?
Well, I would say that I think it's very important to have that option, because, you know, like at my office, we go into this anticipating that at any given time someone could be contact traced, and we're going to have to work together from home and from the office. So, you know, definitely go into it expecting that even if we plan to go for all school, some kids are going to have to stay home for 2 weeks just because, you know, they ended up getting contact traced.
I'll put this out there. These are some of the discussions at the state level of having younger students who need more personal attention coming more often to school. And for higher level students, high school, maybe 8th grade level, of course, the state would decide that, coming to school less frequently. And this is not a personal judgment against any teachers, but some classes require a lot more personal, in-person and physical hands-on education, i.e. science, tech, maybe mathematics. Other classes like English and history can be done more easily remotely. So the discussions at the state level would be having students come in for the once or twice or 3 times a week, whatever they would decide ultimately, for those more intensive classes that require the in-person hands-on for the older students, and then having them work from home the other days. And that way we could have the younger students who require the more personal attention, and the special ed students who require a higher level of personal attention in the building more often. That way we have an easier time possibly with transportation, and we reduce contact, so we might reduce spread if we have a breakout. That's what's being discussed kind of at the state levels as one of the possibilities. So I just wanted everybody to know what other people have been talking about beyond us.
Right. You know, and again, you know, that's what the combination means. Okay, so if you have, you know, you had mentioned a couple minutes ago, Nancy, I believe, that, you know, we have children that have needs, and maybe those are the ones that we bring back to school, 5 days a week if we can. Okay. But just to give you a little info as to like what we've talked about here is, like the Germantown, we have say 600 kids. If we brought 120 of them a day to the school, a different 120 students every day, that would be the entire 600 in an entire week. At least they're getting 1 day here. The other 4 days would be taught remotely. Again, these are just thoughts. Nothing's concrete, and no decisions have been made. But at least the good thing about that is, again, think outside the box. By kids coming here at least 1 day a week, they could be tested so that we know that they're not getting help from family members. Okay, so we give a better assessment as to how they're doing with their test. Just things of that nature, But again, these are all great questions, and these are the problems that we're facing. Does anybody else have anything for remote, or I'm sorry, the combination?
I got one thing quick.
Yeah,
just something to keep in mind if we are in a hybrid model. Back to the whole HVAC ventilation topic.
Right.
We should keep in mind like which groups of kids are going to be in which classrooms, how much space is between the groups of kids, and is it enough time to turn the air over in that room before a new group of kids, particularly in the situations like the gym and the music and the lunch where the masks cannot be worn.
Yeah, the answer to your question is no. I mean, the air cannot be changed over that quickly. If a class is leaving and another class is getting ready to come in, no. Okay.
Right.
Also keep in mind for people who are concerned about like filters and things of that in the unit ventilators, the filters will not stop it. If they do create a filter that will stop it, it won't be 100%. Okay, so air still gets around a filter. It is not designed to where the air will only pass through the filter. Okay.
I would kind of add on to that also. It's less that it's not possible, but it's just not practical, right?
Yeah.
If you put one of those like HEPA filters in, it's gonna increase you're gonna need a bigger fan to blow the air through it too. So that could mean huge costs for HVAC upgrades, which isn't probably a practical solution in this case.
And also keep in mind, what if for argument's sake, if a person has COVID, and I'm not a doctor, but I'm going to say this just off the record, even though I'm being recorded. If a person is infected with COVID and goes into a classroom and doesn't have a mask on, or even if they do have a mask on, they sneeze and cough or do whatever, that air is going to get infected, and people are going to breathe it in before it even gets to the air handler. Okay, so it's a moot point, really, unfortunately.
Well, I don't think it is a moot point, because I do think that a number of the guidances, especially the one concerning my office, definitely recommended increasing ventilation as a way to keep the load down, not prevent it entirely.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely increase ventilation. I could open up the outside air dampers and we can get some more airflow. But I don't like to give people a false impression that because we have a special filter in there and we got more outside air, I don't want them to think that they can't get it. It's kind of like wearing a mask. A lot of people don't realize that wearing a mask will stop you from spreading it. It really won't stop you from getting it. Maybe a bit, but you can still get the virus. Don't forget, our eyes aren't covered. Okay, that's something that they don't seem to talk about too much. They're so concerned about the mouth and the nose, but eyes are also a entryway for the COVID.
Right, I think it's about coming up with redundant layers of protection, and every layer reduces it a little bit more. So just because it doesn't prevent something entirely doesn't mean it shouldn't.
But again, whatever protection measures we come up with, like as far as wearing something, that means we have to implement this on all the students. So high school may not be so much of an issue, but when you start getting down to pre-K, kindergarten, it definitely gets challenging, to get these kids to wear whatever it is that's recommended. But
Jim,
again,
can
you know,
I do a couple of things in there?
sure.
So we will increase airflow wherever possible. That's harder in the colder months than it is in the warmer months. But talking to Daniel's point about the spacing of students in classrooms, CDC guidance has spacing recommendations, and we've been looking at classroom sizes. Realistically, under CDC guidance, we will not have more than 9 people, not just students, people, probably in a classroom. The CDC is talking about relaxing that guidance a little bit, in which case the maximum we'll get is 12 to 15 individuals in a classroom, period, for the average classroom. So we're going to be dropping the load of students down anyway. There's been talk of repurposing other rooms into classroom spaces. It's going to depend on what the state recommends. If we move to a hybrid model, that's less of a problem. If we move to a full student model, it's a bigger problem. But there is guidance out there. There's serious consideration of how far people are from each other. We've actually been going around and measuring classrooms to see how we can optimize under proper separation in a classroom and how to get that to work. And I'm just going to put this out there as a caveat for everybody. You see a lot of products in the news right now, special filters, special UV lights, special sprays. A lot of this stuff is snake oil. During a panic and a crisis, there's a lot of people selling a lot of snake oil, and you have to look at all of it with a grain of salt. I mean, we looked at some of these products that say they're going to kill the virus, and when you look at the fine print, it'll take weeks to do it. So for us, what works best for us is good old bleach and the sanitizers. We know that work, but we are looking at every single product that comes out there just in case.
Right, right. All right, listen, we got about 15 minutes left. I really would like to move on to the second question, if everybody's okay with that. All right, good. So we've obviously discussed a lot of issues and concerns. Okay. So question 2, can you provide concrete examples of creative solutions to challenging problems that could work in our school under each of the 3 instructional models? So we know what the problems are. We've identified a lot of them, but what are some concrete solutions that we can do?
I got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
As far as someone brought up a point of like, will people actually wear masks if that's the requirement? And other procedural things. Maybe a solution is, and I don't know how this would be done, some type of like orientation / training / practice where kids can basically do nothing but practice the procedures themselves, you know, like what they have to do, what they're expected to do, so they get used to it. Especially it'll help the younger ones a lot. And also, if what's expected is communicated early enough to the community at large, it'll give parents and families a chance to reinforce with kids and prepare them for what's expected at home, like what's expected in school at home, if that makes any sense. So some type of orientation / training / routine practice might be beneficial if it can be arranged.
Right, right. No, that's a good point. Good point. You know, the kids have to be taught, you know, how to do it and everything. Anybody else? No concrete solutions, huh?
No, I liked the idea of transitioning one class at a time, changing the rotation of classrooms.
Right.
Or even one, you know, they'd have to do it that way, but it'd be difficult on the receiving end. You can transition one side. That's going to be the tricky part, but I think trying to limit transitions between classrooms is going to be a key component, especially in heavily populated hallways.
Exactly. And maybe even like the one-way traffic so that they're not mixing as much.
So, but if 20 kids leave a classroom and they all have to go to a different classroom, if a kid was infected, the class that he just left, he would end up going to another class with different students in it. Do you think that would be the best scenario for that?
Well, not all that. If you're going back in person, unfortunately, kids are going to have to move around at some point.
Right.
And
fine. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm devil's advocate here, you know. Just, you know, I want to try to get the wheels spinning because I've been dealing with this for quite some time now, you know, in this aspect. So along with principals and Sue. So I just want you to understand the issues that are out there, there. But anyway, anybody else?
Are you about the pod idea? Like students and the teachers move? Were you talking about that, Jim?
I mentioned that before, but again, there's problems with that too. How do I send, I use Sam Jones as a teacher, a science teacher. How do I send him to a history room? How does that work out? Not going to have any of his stuff. How does a math teacher go to an English room? It's
it would that scenario would work for the elementary students, right? Where they only swap like K through 6, where they either swap 1 or 2 teachers. Obviously not gym, not music.
Yeah, I mean, it probably could. I mean, that's more of a question for Beverly, the elementary principal. But as far as health and safety concern, leaving all the kids in the room would definitely contain any virus if there was one, in that particular room. I mean, we could feed the kids in the elementary. Playgrounds, I think, would have to be closed. As far as kids going to any kind of computer class or, library or something of that nature, I don't know, how would that work?
Well, the device ratio gives them the opportunity to do computer class in the classroom, I would think, right? Because everybody has a device.
That is true. That is true.
Yes, I think you could limit the transitions in the elementary a lot more, especially because really, even if we had PE and music and we were transporting, they would be transporting 1 or 2 classes at a time. So as long as you left time in between, they're primarily in the classroom itself for most things. And like Tony said, the computer could be in the classroom with the devices they have in there now too. So we could put as much as we could in the classroom and only transition for say PE or music or whatever else we find we need to art.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, we're running a little short in time, so I'd like to move on. Same question about concrete examples of creative solutions for remote instruction. None. Yeah. Challenging. Definitely challenging. The good thing is that when this meeting's over today, you guys can take these questions home with you and discuss it with other people, and maybe get some more input so that when we do meet again, we'll have maybe some different answers or better answers. About a combination of creative solutions.
Well, I mentioned this in my comments, but I think that along the lines of combination, I think it'd be wise to plan to have good weather and bad weather solutions, especially if we rely on outdoor spaces for any of the solutions.
Okay, that's interesting. Good weather, bad weather. You mean like outside or?
Well, I mean, for example, if one of our solutions is I'm not saying this is the solution. Maybe one of the solutions is to have gym outside. Okay. Are we going to do that if it's raining outside? If it is, what's our backup?
Okay.
Right, or similarly, if band's outside, I mean, things like that, having backup lesson plans that could be done if we have a bad weather day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that would work, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, so that would work up to about maybe November, and then anything outside would definitely be kibosh.
Snowed on.
Unless Mother Nature is really nice to us and gives us 80-degree days in December and January.
Not in 2020.
Exactly. Again, these are great having these discussions because, again, I've sat in so many meetings and, it's it's very challenging. Trust me, it's very challenging. Okay, I want to get to the third question. We got about 5 minutes. Okay. We're over here. What institutional, budgetary, and regulatory obstacles, including policies, stand in the way of our success in each of the 3 instructional models?
lack of supplies, accessibility of supplies, and lack of money to buy them, especially now since the prices of everything has tripled, quadrupled.
Well, again, just to give you a little insight, so when it says like what instructional, budgetary, and regulatory obstacles, so instructional, so if we were to bring everybody back, one of the challenges would be getting all these rooms cleaned, right? You know, I would need a much bigger crew in order to go into these rooms and really sanitize these rooms to the point where they're ready for the next day. So I just wanted to point something like that out. Keep in mind, pre-K, kindergarten, they have all these little toys and all these little things that they touch. They touch their desks, even high school. You know, they touch their desks, they touch their lockers. You know, are we going to allow lockers? Should they have to be cleaned every day? You know. Anyway, the floor is back open to you guys.
I got another one.
Yeah.
I just forgot it. I'll be back in a minute when I remember it.
Okay. Okay, no problem. So again, you know, instructional, budgetary.
Sorry, how about increased staff for the screening process you'll need to do daily? You don't have enough people to take temperatures or monitor buses.
Exactly. And do you have to be medically certified to take a temperature? You know, that's the other question. You know,
that's true. At work, they had security guards. I don't believe so, but they had security guards basically go through a training on how to use an infrared thermometer.
Okay.
Yeah, there's trainings on how to become a screener.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
We're actually experimenting with infrared camera technology to take the temperatures. But no, the Department of Health doesn't require you to be a medical professional, just some basic level of training.
Will the camera?
But ultimately, it comes down to having bodies, people to help clean, people to help monitor, people to help enforce, you know, the rules so that things run smoothly. Budget would be ultimately most needed for payroll, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Building on that topic, probably have a lot more people calling out sick. Do you have enough subs on board? Do the subs understand the procedures? Do they know everything that the teachers know about what needs to be done?
Right.
Right. You know, getting back to the whole temperature thing, there's a lot of scenarios. I'm going to throw them out there just so you could hear them. So one scenario, okay, let's just say you have a kindergarten getting off the bus and the temperature is 100.4. Anybody over 100.4 cannot come into the building, okay? But what if their temperature is 100.4, 100.5? What do you do with the kindergarten? You just got off the bus. You're going to put them back on the bus, bring them home? What if there's nobody home?
Shouldn't the students be getting their temperature screened before they get on the bus?
Well, that's a good question. Very good. You know, they should be. So that means that somebody's going to have to ride the bus with the bus driver. Okay, so
that also adds a challenge of each stop is going to be that much longer.
Yep.
Because you got to monitor, get them on.
And not everyone at the bus stop has a parent there. You can't just leave a kid at the bus stop.
And keep in mind, buses start heading out about 6:30 in the morning, 6:15 in the morning. They got to go all the way to Ankrum. You know, it's not like, you know, 15 minutes long. So
also, I think the infrared thermometer is dependent on the atmosphere. So if they're standing outside, their surface temperature of their skin is a different temperature. So you might get false readings.
Yeah.
We have a little circle we walk around at work until we get to the thermometer, so your face, your head stabilizes basically.
Yeah. So two kids are waiting for the bus and they're running around playing tag or something like that, and they're all sweaty, and you know their temperature comes back at 101 because they're running around.
There has been talk of districts asking parents to pre-screen their kids before they put them on the bus, and then we verify their temperatures when they get home.
That's what my job is doing with our special education program. The parents have to pre-screen, notify, and then we screen again when they get to school to just verify the temperature. That's the process.
The problem with screening on the bus is A, bus drivers may not be amicable to this, but B, if you're using a contract bus, that may not be possible. They may not agree to it. So if you're your own buser, that's one thing, but if you're using a contract bus, that may no longer be an option available. So.
Right.
Transportation is a nightmare. We're expecting just in cost alone for transportation to see a $1.5 million increase. There's been outlays from the state talking about just to keep up, a school district may have to put up another $1.5 million to $3.5 million every year to just keep up with the cleaning and the procedures. So budget-wise, this is a nightmare.
So just so everybody knows, if we get booted back to the main room, I'll see you there. I don't know if that's what's going to happen or if we're going to be prompt to do that. But I'd like to move on to the remote instructional part of that same question. So budgetary and regulatory obstacles, policies, and things of that nature. So budgetary. Everybody needs a computer. And I know we have a lot of computers and a lot of kids have computers here.
And internet.
You got the
internet. There's a lot of places that still do not have.
Yep.
Yeah. Internet's an issue for a lot of families, okay?
My daughter has friends that came here to do their work because they didn't have internet at their own house. So
What if a computer doesn't
still
work?
an exposure risk if you really think about it.
Yeah.
Still a health and safety risk because kids don't have it. They're going to each other's house to share resources.
Right.
You're not restricting your contact.
Right.
You got to do the work.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the state is, if it's the same group of people, so if it's one group of students just sharing resources, they're not sharing with anybody else, the state is actually okay with that. So let's say it was we talked about pods for classrooms. If it was a pod outside of a classroom, it's the same students sharing the same resources, as long as they're not interacting with anybody else, the state is actually okay with that. And I think their current size they've been talking about is a group of 10 students, no greater. So if you had 10 students that were sharing resources outside of school because they had to for internet access, as long as they weren't interacting with anybody else, the state might be amicable to that because they've been talking about that.
That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel like we should have some type of feedback on record already, since teachers and staff were thrown into that situation back in March. So there should be some pretty good feedback to tap into. I know that my daughter was in pre-K, so that's really where my experience stops. But her teacher was really vigilant in making sure everyone had internet access, had the resources they need. So teachers, we kind of did have to go that remote learning way already. We should have at least some information to go on to establish at least the set of students that we were working with last year, if they were ill prepared or if they seemed to be able to gather the resources they needed.
Mm-hmm.
And Sue had mentioned too that in her introduction in the Zoom that we did have kind of a quick run at it, and there are ways to improve.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be more challenging as more people go back to work. So we probably would end up having to create those pods of 10 students where it would also be like a childcare situation.
Yeah, because that's one of the big things that keeps flashing in my head. That's still a health and safety risk. If you really think about it, it still fits our group. If parents are forced to go back to work, we're not all going to be able to be remote forever. It's not going to happen. Right. Things are going to have to open, or the world is going to shut down. We're not going to have grocery stores. We're not going to have stores, etc. People are going to have to go to work. What happens to these kids? I mean, we can't all assume that every parent is going to be able to stay home, or one parent. We're not going to be able to pay our bills.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I know that we're specifically talking about schools, but it's the same with any location. Parents are going to have to go back to work. There's nothing, I mean, some of you are parents. You're going to have to go back to work. What do you do with your young children?
Yeah, no, definitely. These are, again, these are all great questions. I keep saying that, but it's this is all part of the process, and that's why we're recording everything, so that this could all be, listened to and gone over. And I mean, imagine all schools doing this, coming up with all these great questions.
What about GAP being offered on the days there are no classroom for the students that are doing partial, where there's pods in GAP with the teachers' assistants helping out, something along those lines to help with childcare?
I mean, that's a possibility. I will say this much about GAP. It's not a school-funded program. Okay, this is, it's an outside group actually that is, not really too sure how it works, but it's not something that
Okay.
the school does. They kind of like borrow our space. Okay, but GAP is a excellent source of, babysitting service for kids, you know.
Yeah, it's a licensed New York State daycare.
Yeah, but again, the challenges there are basically the same with us, you know. I know Janet will take the kids, she used to run GAP, the kids would all meet in the cafeteria at 3 o'clock. They sit around a table, they eat, have their snack, then go out to like the playground and then come back in and break off into groups and, do whatever, games or homework or whatever it was. But again, we're faced with the challenges of all this, COVID stuff.
Yeah, kind of like Paul just said in the chat. If you bring GAP into it, you're essentially bringing the building back into the picture and then all of the procedures surrounding keeping that building sterile.
Yeah.
Sorry, Paul. I'll use sterile lightly, keeping it clean and clean.
Yeah, GAP would need to have its own location, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, which would
They
be
do have a GAP room, right? I don't have anyone in GAP. No, they don't.
They have a GAP, like it's a small picture, like a half a classroom, but that's not where the kids go. They all meet in the cafeteria, and
well, if the cafeteria won't be used for lunch because everyone's eating in their classrooms, the cafeteria could be used for GAP.
In policy.
Well, that possibly,
Right.
But they're also talking about taking large instructional spaces and making them into small instructional spaces.
Oh.
They're talking about taking the gyms and making small cubicles. Yeah. And I'm sure that would impact the cafeteria. So again, these are ideas and just stuff that has come down the pike. And it hasn't gone anywhere. I'm not saying that's what they're doing, but it really just throws a wrench like in every idea that you come up with. So it's difficult. I say we all meet on the soccer field. We'll set chairs up 6 feet apart. But again, a lot of problems. Yeah.
Could I just ask? I was reading again somewhere else. I'm not even sure what state it was, but they were talking about using like community spaces. Does that get too complicated? Like Palatine Park, the whatever you call that building, the activities building. Yeah, the rec building, or the library, or the firehouse. I know we've done the AP exam in the firehouse space. Like, does that become like a regulatory nightmare?
We haven't talked too much about that. At least I haven't with anybody, Sue. Is that an option? I mean, the town would have to agree to that option. Okay, and then whatever provisions have to be made to do the cleaning and do all that kind of stuff would also have to fall into the mix. So then if we were to use, say, the activity building, the firehouse, whatever else we have around here, maybe a church or the library, then we might have to, get these custodians into these buildings at some point to get them disinfected and cleaned, so not saying it can't happen, but again, just talking outside the box here, these are problems that we're faced with. I mean, we have a big building. It's just a matter of, having enough people to clean it. And if you do have everybody come back, that poses a risk problem for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's no magic bullet here. There's no easy fix. A lot of problems. If kids come back, we risk getting sick. If kids don't come back and they remote learn, obviously the education portion of it's not going to be what it was. So a lot of challenges here. A lot of challenges. Combination, maybe it's not so bad. At least the kids get out, get here 1-2 days a week, whatever we can, I don't know. But again, I'm not trying to put thoughts in anybody's head. It's just, I'm just speaking facts, and stuff. So, well, it doesn't. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. What about the like students organizations? Like, if you have the honor society kids or looking for hours, or I know they had some part-time student custodial staff. Like, can that be incorporated in a cleaning model that just helps both sides of the fence, right? You have the volunteer hours being covered, and you got classrooms being cleaned.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really know. Given the circumstances with the COVID-19, I don't. Me personally, I know if my kids were back in the school, I don't think I'd want my kids cleaning the rooms, only because they're my children. I don't want them getting sick, that kind of thing. Let's leave it up to the professionals. Not to say that I'm right in what I'm saying, but that's just how I feel personally. We certainly could look into that. Okay, definitely an option. I mean, we would have to run that by. Whatever, Sue. She would have to check with attorneys. I would
Well,
think.
it could be like any other thing that the school has to ask parents permission for their kids to do. I mean, I have to ask parents permission for my kid to go on a field trip. I would sign a consent. I'm with Tony. I would sign a consent for my daughter to be able to assist. For one, it's giving back to her school, and it's doing something good for the community and for the health and safety of everybody else.
Yeah, no, definitely.
With the proper PPE and training, they could
easily do temperature screenings at the doors. Imagine the staff you'd have with the Honor Society every day screenings.
Yeah. I mean, I won't lie. My daughter joined one of these teams so she could have her voice be heard, and she could earn her honor hours that she doesn't know how else she's going to be able to earn them.
Right. No, that's a great question. It's definitely a possibility. And that's a great point. I mean, having kids do it,
There's a sticking point there. Students are not allowed to do anything in a school currently under SCD guidelines that is considered a job or that is a task done by an employee. That's not to say that they couldn't do these kinds of things, but it would have to be a decision that SCD hands down and allows for. Under the current regulations, a student could not do it.
Well, that's what our discussion is about, is looking at what the barriers are in the regulation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of regulations right now, but I think that with this pandemic going on, I think that, not to say what Paul's saying is wrong, I think what he's saying is correct, but again, I think things could be tweaked a bit if it's going to help the situation, as long as we get proper approval from the state.
Well, we need to know where the roadblocks are. I mean, the ideas are great. I'm not dissing the ideas,
right.
But if we have the ideas, we need to know where the roadblocks are so we can work at getting those roadblocks down.
Yeah.
Well, there's hundreds of roadblocks. I mean, Regents exams is a roadblock to begin with. Think about the testing that kids require. Yeah. They're not getting done. I mean, I know that's the education group and not the health and safety, but there's zillions of roadblocks that all of these plans are creating.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you folks that there's a lot of things that we haven't even touched on today, as far as roadblocks. There's a lot more. So it is a very difficult thing to do. Again, do we come back in September, full staff, partial, or not at all until maybe after, say, the Christmas break? Let's give this coronavirus thing a chance to die out, hopefully. Do we chance it and bring people back? Again, these are all like ideas that, we don't know. I mean, look at the other states, how the virus is starting to spike in certain states. So, and we don't want to see people get sick. It's it's just, I think we all feel that way. We don't want to see somebody get sick, even if for any reason, whatever. But anyway. All right. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add?
Cheryl has her hand up.
I just want to bring something Jen said in the chat just to the forefront so we make sure everyone saw it. But the attendance policy so that families who exercise an abundance of caution in keeping students home, so that policy doesn't work against them. Just something that we've got to put a tack in it and maybe focus some energy on, because that is technically a policy that could complicate hybrid or in building education. I thought that was a really great point. I would never have thought of that.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That's true. I mean, even if we did something where we were going to have school come back in September, I mean, do we give the option for students to stay home? You know, make it optional. You know,
and that's the thing. I know that fever, temperature checks are kind of all we have right now.
Yeah.
But that's not like the end all be all. There are people who have this virus that obviously the asymptomatic ones, but I know with my father, who ultimately died after being intubated for 12 days with COVID, which is why I feel so strongly about being on this team. He didn't have a fever. Those typical symptoms did not persist in him till like 2 weeks later. So I know I will use exercise an abundance of caution, and I just wouldn't want any parents to feel deterred from keeping children home, because temperature scans really are not going to catch them all. Nothing that anyone can do will catch it all. I totally understand that, but you would want families feeling comfortable in their relationship with the school. That's really just my.
No,
I'm calling regarding my son Ian Rios. We got your phone number and from Dr. Cicatello.
Somebody
Who's
phone
this?
on?
I don't know, my phone's being weird.
Oh,
Yeah, I just heard someone's phone call.
okay. But that was a great point. You know, again, you know, the state has not come out with any kind of guidelines or regulations right now. You know, if the state says, you know, if somebody poses a temperature greater than 100.4, then we may have to send those kids home, if that's what the state says. Again, there is no guidance right now. All right, it looks like we're being prompted to leave the breakout room. So, listen, it was great chatting with everybody, and I'm sure we'll meet again. So just click your little blue button there, and I'll see you on the other side.